Yes, Kalpana, you got it right.
Hello.
Dr. Kalpana, please proceed. Yes. Dr. Kalpana, can you hear me? Kalpana? Hello?
Illama, you are not audible, ma. Your slides are moving, but you are not audible. What you can do, like even if it is not a slideshow, you can start.
Okay, sir. Now I'm audible, sir.
Yeah, you're audible, madam. Just from the beginning, on the right flow. Click பண்ணுங்க. I think it should work. Yeah, I'll click பண்ணுங்க. Just click like that.
Now, am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible, but
You're audible, go
I think you proceed, madam.
Okay.
Full presentation.
Sorry for the technical. Okay. So always ask for the history of contact. Look specifically for the closeness of contact. The sputum smear result of the index case if it's known. The timing of the contact. Children usually develop within 2 years after exposure to the adult contact, and most children, they develop within the first year. So timing of the contact is also important. If you don't have an obvious contact, then probably do a contact screen for all the adults in the household. Always remember the atypical presentations like acute severe pneumonia, especially in infants and HIV infected infants. You have to suspect if there is poor response to antibiotics and there is a positive contact. So even if they present as acute pneumonia, if there is a positive contact in the household, always evaluate for tuberculosis. Second atypical presentation which can be missed is the wheeze. The wheeze can be asymmetrical, it can be persistent, or when it does not respond poorly to bronchodilator, you have to suspect tuberculosis. It might be because of an enlarged node that is compressing on the trachea or the bronchus. Especially when you have persistent wheeze in a malnourished child, it is more likely to be because of tuberculosis rather than asthma per se. The first investigation that we most commonly use is the chest X-ray. But the importance of chest X-ray in evaluation of tuberculosis is classifying the X-ray into whether it is suggestive of tuberculosis or which is not suggestive of tuberculosis. So if it's suggestive, hilar adenopathy, miliary tuberculosis, and chronic fibrocavitary disease, these X-rays are classified as suggestive of tuberculosis. And all the other that we usually see like consolidations, non-homogeneous opacities, ground glassings, and thin-walled cavities, all are classified as not suggestive of tuberculosis. Why do we have to classify the X-ray into these two is because if the X-ray is suggestive of tuberculosis, you can go and do an upfront gene expert without waiting for a course of antibiotics. But if the X-ray is not suggestive of tuberculosis or it's non-specific like consolidations or opacities, it is ideal to give a course of antibiotic. And at the end of the course, if the child remains symptomatic and the X-ray radiologically persists, then probably you might have to then go for a TB evaluation. But as you know,
Dr. Kalpana, your slides are not moving, ma. Okay. You need to click every time. I think something is not all right. So kindly move the slides after you finish this, every slide. Thank you, ma.
Okay, sir. The slide is visible, sir?
Yeah, it's visible, ma.
Okay. So reading an X-ray is an important skill. So you have to account for rotated X-rays, the phases of expiration, the penetration of the X-rays, thymic shadows, especially in infants, and motion artifacts. So all these X-rays, however bizarre they may seem, they are all normal X-rays. So you have to interpret X-ray in the context of the clinical findings of the child. Before we go on to lab investigations, I would like to spend some time on obtaining a representative sample, because whatever fancy test that we might subject the sample to, if you're not going to take a proper sampling, then it is not going to help the child. So the first thing that we use is the first most commonly done sampling technique is the resting gastric juice. So it is something like using a meter dose inhaler with a spacer for every child with asthma. It can be done in all age groups and it is the most preferred sampling technique. Most studies have shown that the highest yield from cultures is from a resting gastric juice. WHO recommends that it has to be done on each of 2 consecutive mornings, and the samples can be pooled for CBNAT or culture. But so this technique actually increases the yield from resting gastric juice. There are certain caveats, like it can be done only in hospitalized children, and for performing the test, we require 2 people, one for doing the test and one to assist. The child should be fasting for at least 4 hours, and in infants, it should be at least for 3 hours. The contraindication is thrombocytopenia. Other than that, there are not much contraindications. As well known, most of us know the technique of doing a resting gastric juice, but the step that is frequently missed is after collecting a resting gastric juice, add an equal volume of sodium bicarbonate solution to the specimen. So this will prevent the tubercle bacilli, the gastric acidity, from destroying the tubercle bacilli and will definitely improve your yield in the cultures. So this can be a critical step for culturing. And definitely the delay in processing the sample should not be more than 4 hours. If there is a delay of 4 hours, more than 4 hours, place in a refrigerator at 4 to 8 degrees centigrade and store until transported. So resting gastric juice is not an aerosol generating procedure, and children as such, they are not at high risk for transmitting tuberculous disease. So it can be safely performed at the child's bedside or in a routine procedure room itself. So sputum induction. Sputum induction does not require overnight hospitalization. The sputum induction, you have to administer inhaled bronchodilator. It is followed by giving nebulized hypertonic saline, that is 3 to 5% saline. And this is followed by a nasopharyngeal aspiration if the child is not able to expectorate the sputum, or the child is able to expectorate, gets a cough after the nebulization and is able to expectorate, then you can go ahead and ask the child to expectorate the sputum. And initial studies had shown that the yield from 1 induced sputum is equal to 3 gastric samples. So this has shifted clinical practice guidelines to include sputum induction as an important method of collecting samples in children. But remember, it is an aerosol generating procedure and should be performed only in an isolation room. For the child as such, it is a low risk procedure. Tens and thousands of sputum inductions have been done in children and they found to be very safe. There are minor side effects that have been reported, like coughing spells, mild wheezing, and nosebleeds. And how young can a child be subjected to induced sputum? So it is a relatively safe procedure. The only thing the technician should be able to, he or she should know how to do the procedure. Otherwise, sampling has been done as in children, infants as young as 1 month of age. So sputum induction can be done even in young infants. Are there any contraindication? So sputum induction also requires fasting. Otherwise, the child might vomit out the stomach contents. So fasting for at least 3 hours is required for sputum induction. In the presence of severe respiratory distress like rapid breathing or wheezing, it is not advisable to do sputum testing. Similarly, in the presence of thrombocytopenia, severe nose bleeding, or a child with a bleeding tendency, it is not advisable. Reduced level of consciousness, again, is a relative contraindication. And if the child is a severe asthmatic, again, it is not advisable. So expectoration. Is expectoration a method of sputum collection, yes, it is an important method. It can be done in older children, like similarly for when you advise dry powder inhaler, that is from 7 to 8 years, when the child is able to follow your instructions and able to bring out sputum. In that age group, expectoration can be used as a method of bringing out a representative sample. But expectoration also is a procedure. So you just cannot ask the child to cough and bring out a sputum sample. The sample should be coming from the lower airways. So the technique is ask the child to take 2 deep breaths and hold the breath for a few seconds after each inhalation and then exhale slowly. A third time, the child has to breathe in and then forcibly blow out the air. And the fourth time, the child has to breathe in again and then cough. So after the cough, they give the container to the child and ask him to bring out the sputum. But expectoration, because it has to be a representative sample, you have to give the child time to bring out the sputum. If the child is not able to cough out in the first attempt, you ask the child to cough out again, breathe in and out, and encourage the child to bring out a representative sample. This method, next method that we're dealing is nasopharyngeal aspiration. Nasopharyngeal aspiration is now picking up as an attractive diagnostic procedure because it requires minimal facilities and training. It is just to measure the length from the trachea to the nose, and using under a suction, you aspirate the nasopharyngeal contents. Initial studies had shown that the yield was very good from actually studies from Peru and Uganda. In children with a mean age of 4 or 5 years had shown that the culture yield from nasopharyngeal aspirate was very similar to that of gastric aspirate. But a subsequent study from Peru itself showed the yield was very little. Finally, Zar et al. Had shown that it could be used as an alternative specimen when you can do 2 nasopharyngeal aspirate and you subject it for GeneXpert, the yield can be as good as cultures. Coming to bronchoalveolar lavage, bronchoalveolar lavage is not a very popular sampling technique for endobronchial tuberculosis because it is an invasive procedure, can be done only in tertiary centers where the facility is available. And earlier studies had shown that the yield was lower than multiple gastric aspirates. But in studies from tertiary centers have shown that the diagnostic yield of BAL can be better than a gastric aspirate. Kabra sir in 2011 had shown that you can combine one gastric aspirate and bronchoscopy to improve the AFB yield in children with suspected pulmonary tuberculosis. And the subsequent study was again done in 2018, where they suggested that BAL can be used as a diagnostic aid in children with smear negative. So that is what we follow in ISH also, or in the other tertiary centers. When the initial evaluation with induced sputum or resting gastric juice is negative, the child is subjected to BAL. Because advantage is that you can visualize, can take specimens from the involved lobe. You can take a representative sample both for the smear cultures as well as GeneXpert. And the second advantage is that you can you can assess the airway for any abnormalities. In 15 to 40% of children with advanced tuberculosis, they will have airway abnormalities. So for assessing endobronchial lesions, bronchoscopy will have a definite role. The next specimen would be a fine needle aspiration cytology. It is a very, very satisfying technique because it can be done by ourselves in the bedside, especially if the node is very fluctuant and it is node is fluctuant or is peripherally accessible. The specimen can be processed for several things. One is cytology, which is almost 100% sensitive and specific for tuberculosis if carefully assessed. It can yield the AFP smear in 10 to 15%. It can be culture positive in 20 to 50% and GeneXpert positive in 35%. Suppose the node is not peripherally accessible, you can try ultrasound or CT guided aspiration. The next test that is used in adults is the string test. It was first evaluated for evaluation of tuberculosis in HIV infected adults. You just have a capsule. The first end of the string is just strapped to the cheek, and then this person is asked to swallow the capsule. The string unravels after digestion in the stomach contents. A dwell time is given for 4 hours, and then the string is withdrawn and subjected to cultures. So the yield was found to be better than induced sputum in adults. And subsequently, the same technique was also proposed in children and found to be well tolerated with a median age of 8 years. And another study had shown that even if you reduce the dwell time of less than 1 year, 1 hour, again, you can have a good yield. You needn't have a loss of yield. So studies in children have been done with the string test. It was tolerated by children as young as 4 years of age, but as you can see, it cannot be done in most children less than 4 years. So this is about the sampling techniques. You have to attempt microbiological diagnosis in all cases of suspected tuberculosis. How many samples can you take? If it's a smear sample, that is for AFB smear, you need to take 2 samples. If it is for gene expert, 1 sample. Culture, 1 sample, but pooling of samples can increase the yield. If the CSF is obtained and the amount of CSF is very small, WHO recommends the sample be processed for gene expert in preference to smear or culture. Take a representative sample of CSF. 2 ml can be, at least up to 2 ml can be removed safely in units. In older children, 3 to 6 ml of CSF can be safely removed. Pleural fluid again is a suboptimal sample. A pleural biopsy would be preferred. So coming to the tests that are available, there are a lot of tests that are in the pipeline as well as in vogue. But as you can see, most of these studies which are evaluating TB tests are done in adults. The publications that have come up with children as their study population, especially when the sample is other than sputum, is dismally low. So most of the reports are, or the results are extrapolated from adults. So this is a nice classification which classifies the tests that we can use to diagnose tuberculosis. One is looking for direct evidence for Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and second is looking for indirect evidence for Mycobacterium infection. So the direct evidence includes smear microscopy, mycobacterial cultures, novel culture systems like microscopically observed drug resistance, drug sensitivity, nucleic acid amplification methods like GeneXpert, line probe assay, and LAMP, microarray, and gene sequencing. There are indirect evidence for mycobacterial infections like T-cell assays, including MANTO and IGRA, tests that are based on biomarkers, that those related to the pathogen are lipoarabinomannan and transdermal MPB64 antigen, those related to the host, including adenosine deaminase. So we'll deal with each of the tests in a very brief way. The first will be smear microscopy. It has actually gone out of vogue in places where GeneXpert is readily available, but still in peripheral centers, smear microscopy is being done. Even if you do it properly, the yield from smear microscopy in children is very dismal. WHO recommends that you do 2 smears in the same visit in order to reduce the dropout percentage. Conventional microscopy has to be replaced by more sensitive methods like fluorescent microscopy. But even if you do a fluorescent microscopy and concentrate the specimen before that, the smear positive from gastric lavage in children is only up to 20%. WHO has recommended to replace smear microscopy with the LED microscopy. So LED microscopy is just a smear microscope which uses LED to visualize the Raman fluorescent stained smear. It is less expensive, it requires less power and can run on batteries. The bulbs have a long half-life and they can perform well in the light room, while fluorescent microscopy requires a dark room. The WHO has recommended that LED microscopy should replace conventional microscopy in both high prevalence as well as low prevalence settings. There are certain newer diagnostics like the TBDX system, which is an automated digital platform, and the Capture XT system, which actually concentrates the bacilli into small chambers and then does the smear.
Kalpana, can you move the slide? Yeah. Thank you.
Coming to the molecular detection methods, the most commonly that we do or we are all very familiar is the GeneXpert. It is a fully automated nucleic acid amplification test. It is done in a self-contained cartridge. There is no processing of the sample. There is no cross-contamination. So in the same cartridge using microfluidics, the DNA is extracted, it is amplified, and it is detected. It can identify the MTB directly from the samples in less than 2 hours. The limits of detection is it can detect up to as minimum as 131 colony-forming units of tubercle bacilli per ml of sputum. So is it the magic test that it was initially proposed? In children, it differs because when it was initially introduced, It was proposed as the positive rate was projected from the smear positive, culture positive tuberculosis. In smear positive, culture positive tuberculosis, the sensitivity was 98 and specificity was very good. But in smear negative, culture positive tuberculosis, the sensitivity fell down to even up to 68%. And clinically diagnosed TB, which is most common population that is actually existing, Gene Expert doesn't do magic because it can detect only up to 4% in induced sputum and 15% in gastric aspirates. But in spite of all these shortcomings, because of the improved sensitivity over smear microscopy, because of the rapid turnover time, that is 5 to 2 hours, and the ability to detect rifampicin resistant, Gene Expert has dramatically changed the diagnostic capacity of children with tuberculosis. Moreover, all the samples, almost all samples can be subjected to smear microscopy except urine and blood. But remember, it should not be used as a follow-up test. When a child is on ADT, when the child comes back with a poor response or just for follow-up at 2 months or so, we cannot use Gene Expert as a follow-up test because it can give false positive results. The other two nucleic acid amplification tests that are available are the Expert RIF Ultra. It is a next generation cartridge. It is more sensitive than Gene Expert with a sensitivity as low as 16 colony forming units per ml of sputum. It is proposed as the preferred CBNAT in children with HIV positive, in pediatric specimens and extrapulmonary specimens, especially CSF. Rifampicin resistance is also detected more accurately with the Gene Expert Ultra. It might replace Expert Ultra in the near future. But not to mention TrueNAT. TrueNAT is the Indian variation of Gene Expert. The main advantage is that it is battery operated and it has drastically brought down the cost of doing nucleic acid amplification testing. But the disadvantage is that it is not fully automated, and samples like gastric aspirate, which is the most common sample that we send from children, they need centrifuging before they can be subjected to TrueNAT. That is why most of the RNTCP centers now are doing TrueNAT for adult samples, but they are refusing to accept pediatric samples. So what are some of the other nucleic acid amplification assays are the loop-mediated isothermal amplification assays. This was a temperature-independent method of DNA amplification. It is a simple-to-use test. It provides a visual display that is easy to read and is suitable for usage in peripheral health centers. The WHO has recommended the LAMP as a diagnostic tool in adults, especially when they come for follow-up and are smear negative. The sensitivity is found to be better than smear microscopy, and it has been that it can be used in children. One other way is the microarray. Because of all these problems in taking specimens from children, we have diagnostics have now shifted to other methodologies where you can just take blood samples or sputum samples and look for pattern of RNA expression. In some studies, it has been shown that certain RNA risk scores can be highly specific and sensitive for culture-confirmed tuberculosis, and they can differentiate active from latent tuberculosis. Again, these tests did not perform well in clinically diagnosed tuberculosis. And moreover, all these studies, all these methodologies, they need modifications to make the technology more feasible to be workable in the peripheral centers. Coming to the gold standard is mycobacterium culturing. It is the current gold standard. The sensitivity is as low as 10 colony forming units per ml of sample. The great advantage is that we can do a species identification and we can do a complete drug accessible testing. Suppose we are going to isolate the organism in the culture. The specimen type influences the sensitivity of the culture. The highest yield of mycobacterial cultures comes from gastric aspirates. It is more than from induced sputum or nasopharyngeal aspirates or bronchial lavage specimens or from stool samples. Again, the sensitivity is high in children with advanced disease and infants. Remember that the specimen that you are subjecting to culture should be representative of the site of infection. For example, this was a child who had presented with chronic draining sinuses for almost 1 year and was pouring out pus, and every time the pus was sent for Gene Expert and cultures, did not yield any of the tuberculosis. But ultimately, a bone biopsy, the osteomyelitis, which was source of all these sinuses, actually proved to be culture positive. So you have, when you subject a case, when you are evaluating a child for tuberculosis, you have to take a representative sample and send it for culturing. The culture should be collected aseptically in order to prevent the overgrowth of the other contaminant bacteria in the midget systems. The after processing is also important. As I said, you have to add sodium bicarbonate after you collect the specimen. The second is the specimen should arrive in the laboratory on the day of collection. If the delay is more than 1 hour, you refrigerate at 4 degrees. That should be done not only from the place of transport, it should be done also in the laboratory until it is processed. If suppose a prolonged storage or transport is expected, preservatives can be added like sodium carbonate, cetylpyridine chloride, and sodium borate. So the current recommendation of WHO is to use continuous monitoring liquid cultures like the Mycobacterium growth indicated tube or midget. Because of its better sensitivity and faster results, the cultures can be got as early as 2 weeks and additional 2 weeks for drug sensitivity testing. When compared to solid cultures, we can take it up to 4 weeks for culture and another 4 to 6 weeks for drug sensitivity testing. Liquid culture platforms that are available include the BACTEC N960 widget, BACTEC Alert, and MycoESP culture system. The sensitivity of culture is only 30 to 40% of the clinically diagnosed cases, even though we consider it as a gold standard. But as I said, the major advantage is that we can get the good complete drug sensitivity testing, susceptibility testing. Species identification. It is recommended that we have to do in every culture isolate, we have to identify the species at least to the point of differentiating Mycobacterium tuberculosis from environmental bacteria. Sometimes we would specifically ask for the species, for example, in disseminated BCGiosis in children with SCID or MSMD. Classically, species differentiating is done using biochemical reactions, but we have more and more of PCR assays which are highly sensitive and highly specific for species identification, like the AccuProbe test and the genotype Mycobacteria CMAs. These are PCR-based assays which are highly sensitive for differentiating Mycobacterium TB complex from non-tuberculous mycobacteria. So other culture methods, there are non-commercial culture and DST methods which are WHO approved. These are less expensive than the commercial systems, but they are prone to errors because of lack of standardization and local variations in methodology, and their performance is highly operator dependent. So WHO recommends that these tests only be done in national or reference laboratories where you can maintain the high quality of laboratory practice. Our specific interest is this microscopic observation drug susceptibility, or MONS as it is said. It is just inoculating the specimen into small microwells which contain the medium. Some of the medium can also contain antibiotics, that is anti-tuberculous drugs to inhibit the growth. And then these wells are observed by using microscopically by an inverted light microscope. The good thing is that they can detect growth as early as 7 days, and they can also detect drug susceptibility. But as I said, they are very labor sensitive and they are operator dependent and cannot be done in a peripheral setting. Coming to gene sequencing, this might be a important investigation in the days to come. You can do either whole gene sequencing or next generation sequencing. Whole gene sequencing can detect drug resistance conferring genes, and at the same time can also give the species of the mycobacterial isolates. They have good agreement with the current genotypic and phenotypic techniques. The next is the next generation sequencing. Unlike whole gene sequencing, which can be done only in culture isolates because they require a large sample of the DNA, next generation sequencing can be performed directly from the samples and could be the next the future of TB diagnostics. Coming to the tests which are based on indirect evidence of mycobacterial infection, these includes MANTO and IGRA. So MANTO is an age-old test. We still use MANTO for evaluation of active as well as latent TB infection. We use the 2 TU strength of RT23. It is read after 48 to 72 hours with an induration of 10 millimeter. In children with HIV, a cutoff of 5 millimeter is taken. If the 2 TU is not available, 5 TU may be used. The limitation is that it is neither sensitive nor specific for diagnosing active TB. That is, the presence of a positive mantle does not tell you whether the child is currently suffering from tuberculosis or not. At the same time, the interpretation also can be difficult because the outcome of the test can be highly dependent upon the technique that is adopted, the age of the child, the immunological status, as well as the nutritional status. And the future issues are that tuberculin, the lot source from which mantle is got, is going to be exhausted, and equivalent lots are not going to be the same. And another problem is most of the tuberculins which are available in India are not standardized. So these are issues in the future. So we have newer mantle tests like the CTP test or the Copenhagen TB test. It is not available as of now in India, but it is proposed as a point of care test. The antigen it uses is ESAT6 and CFP10 antigens of MTB. So it is highly specific for MTB infection, unlike mantle. It is unaffected by BCG vaccination status, and induration of 5 millimeter is taken as evidence of infection. Coming to interferon gamma release assays, again, these are only another method of detecting latent infection. The principle is, suppose a child has a prior TB infection, the T cells would be sensitized, and once they are pre-stimulated with MTB specific antigen, they will respond by secreting interferon gamma, and this interferon gamma is measured by these assays. The two antigens that we use is the early secretory antigenic target, that is ESAT6, and the culture filtrate protein 10. A third antigen, that is TB7.7, is used in quantiferon gold assay. These antigens are absent in BCG vaccines and in most non-tuberculous mycobacteria. So it becomes highly specific for M. tuberculosis. The two commercial platforms, one is the quantiferon TB golden tube, and the second is the T-spot test. These assays have a sensitivity which is similar to Manto. That is, they do not give you any more information than Manto. They cannot distinguish latent TB infection from TB disease. And they can be falsely negative because TB disease, advanced TB disease itself can be immunosuppressive. So the T lymphocytes will not have been cannot be adequately stimulated at all. But in developed countries, IGRA has replaced Manto because of its better specificity, and it is unaffected by BCG vaccination and non-tuberculous mycobacteria. But WHO recommends that neither Manto nor IGRA should be used for the diagnosis for active tuberculosis disease, and it should not replace Manto in low and middle income countries because it is costly, it is technically complex to perform, you don't have any additional information rather than what is given by a Manto, and relatively a large volume of blood is required. And moreover, in children less than 2 years, very often we get indeterminate IGRA results which are difficult to interpret. So, and moreover, the performance is poor in immunocompromised children. So IGRA, it's not at present, it is not used as a technique for latent tuberculosis in India. Coming to biomarkers, you could classify them as those related to the pathogen, that is markers that are secreted by the Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and those that are related to the host. Among those that are related to the pathogens, we have lipoarabinol mannan, which is the most investigated and is a commercially available biomarker assay. It is a polysaccharide component of the bacterial cell wall. It is detected in the sputum and the urine. It has good specificity, but again, the sensitivity becomes low in heterogeneous population with low HIV prevalence. Another test is the transdermal MPB64 antigen skin patch test, which has good sensitivity and specificity, and volatile organic compounds that are produced by the pathogen in the patient's sputum. They are again being developed as a point of care test. Biomarkers related to the host, time and again most of the time we get samples, we get results of adenosine deaminase. It is a non-specific test. It is an enzyme which is stimulated, which is secreted by mycobacterial antigens, stimulate T lymphocytes. It can be measured in various body fluids, and as I said, it is very poor sensitivity as well as specificity and is not recommended as a diagnostic test, especially the evaluation of TB pleural disease. The last two slides will be on drug susceptibility testing. So how do we detect drug susceptibility? Either can be by phenotypic methods or by genotypic methods. Phenotypic methods is the conventional, that is we do a culture and then depending upon the presence of the antituberculous drug and the response to the growth of the organism or the inhibition of the growth of the organism, we give the resistance pattern. Although the phenotypic methods are very slow, the complete susceptibility profile of M. tuberculosis can be got with the phenotypic method. So it is the preferred method of drug susceptibility testing in children, especially when you're evaluating cases of multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. But the importance of genotypic methods cannot be underestimated, especially GeneXpert, when the results are available in 4 hours and available in less than 2 hours. And the second is the rifampicin resistance is usually used as a predictor of multi-drug resistance. That is, it's used as a predictor of INH resistance also. So you can make shift the child directly from drug-sensitive TB treatment to drug-resistant TB treatment. Then another one test or PCR-based assay, which is less utilized in children, is the line probe assay. Line probe assay is not advised to be used as a diagnostic test for M. tuberculosis because it requires highs of positive bacilli. It can be performed only on smear positive samples, and but the use in children comes in when you are evaluating for drug resistance in culture. So once you have a culture, either by liquid culture or in culture, rapidly you can apply the line probe assay and you can detect resistance not only to INH and rifampicin, you can also detect resistance to the fluoroquinolones and the second line injectables like capreomycin, amikacin and kanamycin. So this is a test which is very useful for deciding the regimen for drug resistant tuberculosis. So it can detect high level and low level moxifloxacin resistance, and it also can detect resistance for the second line injectable. For example, if the RRS mutation is detected, then you cannot use any of the second line injectables. But if the EIS mutation is detected, you can still include amikacin in the regimen. Similarly, high level and low level INH resistance can also be detected. So these are the genotypic methods for drug resistance. So with that, I come to the end of my topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Kalpana, for this excellent talk on diagnosis of tuberculosis. As she said, like this TrueNat has been introduced, but only thing they need a large specimen, so we don't get to do. And one more thing which I like to mention is that we don't get CTB in the near future. So our RNTCP is advising for bigger children IGRAS, and they have started this project already in Tiruvallur district. Because of the COVID, actually, our ICH was identified as the center of excellence for this region, but unfortunately, we are not able to implement due to COVID. So soon, maybe we also will start doing IGRAS. So any questions, welcome.
Sorry for the technical glitch.
It's okay. Somebody has asked a question. Kalpana, you can stop your slide sharing. Role of biopsy and CT chest. Somebody has asked that question. Yes, more than biopsy, first go for FNSC. FNSC will give you a very good yield of that same FNSC specimen. You can subject to CBNAT, you can do a microscope and all that. So it's a very good specimen. So it reduces the workload of the pathologist too. But then if your biopsy, if the FNSC is not conclusive, yes, there's a role for it. And then Kalpana, they've asked a question for CT chest, the role of CT chest.
CT chest, we don't do CT chest routinely. As you said, when you have a pulmonary tuberculosis, we do GeneXpert, we do resting gastric juice or induced sputum. So that becomes negative. We subject the child next to is to subject the child to bronchoscopy. So we increase the yield. I don't think CT chest gives you any additional information except when you're looking for some nodes. when sometimes the mediastinal adenopathy will not be visible in an ordinary chest X-ray. So a CT chest or a CT contrast can pick up, especially when you put a contrast, you'll be able to detect these caseating nodes. So when you're still strongly suspecting pulmonary tuberculosis in a symptomatic child and the X-ray remains normal, probably you might go in for a CT chest, but it is not advised or it will not give you any additional information when you are more than an X-ray or an ultrasonogram while evaluating a child with CT chest.
Somebody has asked which is the one best for TB. I think the question was about TST and IGRAS, I think, or biopsy, I don't know. Dr. Javed Khan has asked which is the one best for TB.
If you mean for the specimen, it is the resting gastric juice will be the best. Will be the best specimen.